So it's not looking like we're going to see any rate cuts this year, Bronwyn. It might be well into next year even, might not even be the first quarter before we see a rate cut, given inflation is staying high.
Exactly. And this argument that because they've been reduced internationally, therefore they should be reduced here, people forget to tell you that the reduced interest rate in the States is still higher than the cash rate is here, and higher again in the UK. So the argument that says, or rather, that the snake charmer, the illusionist, says the independent RBA is doing all this, it's not me, it's not us, and we've got to have this rate cut, but we're both doing our job. It's this absolute attempt to blame the RBA for the incompetence of the government by increasing its spending, which has made the inflation rate worse than it should be.
Yeah.
So I find the whole idea that both Albo and Chalmers think that if they wish hard enough and they cross their fingers and toes, and if they're really good little people who say their prayers at night, they'll get a cut, right? They'll get a cut in the interest rate. Because otherwise they've got a belt up on the people they appointed to these positions that are making decisions, and they're not doing as they're told.
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean, the whole political strategy
petulant.
for the PM was he wanted a rate cut and then he wanted to announce the election.
I still think an early election is more likely than not.
You're going to be saying that until we're well into December. There'll be no early election, Bronwyn. Let's pivot to the US. A letter by Donald Trump's second would-be assassin has been discovered. Now, Ryan Ruth wrote the letter in case his assassination attempt on the golf course failed, and it's an insight into his thoughts, but it's provoked a lot of controversy. He wrote, "Dear world, this was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I'm so sorry I failed you. I tried my best and gave it all the gumption I could muster. It's up to you to finish the job, and I will offer $150,000 to whoever can complete the job." Caleb, there's now widespread outrage that this note has been made public because the argument is it incites, it encourages another assassination attempt. What do you think?
That may well be true, but it is also a pretty important piece of evidence that at some point had to come out in court anyway. So whether we found it out now or whether we found it out later, it was probably going to be aired at some point. I think it goes to exactly how divided America is at the moment and the real threat that still exists on the head of Donald Trump. Republican Rep Matt Gaetz revealed the other day that he has spoken to people, or at least one person in Homeland Security, and they have the understanding that there are at least 5 groups currently, including 3 that are led by foreign nations, that have a bounty on Donald Trump's head. They want Donald Trump dead. Now, whether or not this letter was released, those groups are still out there. There is still danger to Donald Trump. Someone, I'm convinced, between now and November is going to try to get him again. The real question is why he has not been given extra protection. And I suspect it's because there are certain people who don't want him to have extra protection because they'd rather him dead than elected in November.
Well, I think all those points you made, by the way, are excellent, Caleb, but I think he still does have less protection, doesn't he, than the current president?
Yes.
Yet the evidence shows the threats on his life are greater. I agree with you. It looks like it's more than likely there'll be another attempt on his life.
Well, the worrying thing is who is it that is stopping the protection from being given? And it places the Vice President, I think, in a very invidious position. If I were her, I would be demanding he be given top protection.
She ought to.
It looks like she doesn't care. And I think more should be made of that point. But in that letter, I agree with you, Caleb. I think that letter was going to come out, and it needed to come out because they've got to keep that bloke in jail, not let him out on bail. That's the most important thing.
They couldn't possibly do that, surely.
It's being argued that
United States.
Yeah, and it's being argued that he's not a risk to the society. only to Donald Trump.
But it proves the point that some were trying to make in the leftist media in the US last week, that this was, a potential assassination attempt. There was no potential about it. We now know exactly what he wanted to do. We cannot get around that. That letter proves it.
And what about that incredible woman who saw him, the would-be assassin, thought he looked creepy, he looked wrong, and she followed him and took photographs of the number plate and so on. She's a heroine.
Yes.
We should hear more about her.
Exactly, but again, it goes to your point. Why weren't there security patrolling the location more thoroughly? Why did it have to come down to civilians, individuals?
That's exactly the point. And I think more of this should be sheeted home to Kamala. Yep. Because she is in the position to do something about it.
And even before either of the assassination attempts, there were those in the Congress who were trying to remove his security protection entirely. It's complete outrage. No matter what you think of any politician, we are in a democracy and both need to make it to the election.